be a brain-dead idiot bureaucrat working within the West or within the annals of its quote-unquote think tanks to believe any of this crap that nuclear war is far less dangerous than climate change. That's how stupid the West is. But I don't expect anything less from countries who have gutted their industrial production. And when you gut industrial production, there goes scientific achievement, scientific advancement, mathematic forwardness, anything that has to do with the elevation of the thinking mind is gone with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. I mean, but that's the thing. Like, people don't even know how to think about the basics of physics. Like, we're being given
marketing BS. That's what we have in place of physics. Marketing BS.
Well, that's the thing, right? And if you think about it, like a lot of what happened to the population could only be accounted for over the course of many generations now by the infusion of statistical, mathematically driven forms of thinking, which contaminated how we were allowed to think. Both the governing class as well as the masses in general were conditioned, especially during the earliest days of the Cold War, to think in this very perverse way that destroyed subtlety. It destroyed the natural seeking for context, the ability to look for values in phenomenon that the senses would be able to pick up either through instruments that we use to enhance our senses, microscopes, telescopes, whatever else, or our senses themselves. You know, we see things, we see a multiplicity of chaotic, quantitative material always hitting us. Sound waves, light waves, all the time are constantly hitting us. But not all light waves are equal in the sense that I can identify a lamp, I can identify the quality of a cup, I can, despite all of the different infinite spectrum of sound, I can identify a voice among those frequencies that I associate with the identity of V the gorilla. So I mean, our mind looks for values that we find ordered, simple qualities behind the quantity. But with mathematics, it became a good tool to destroy people's ability to appreciate the quality. So we were told, if you want to know economics, you got to look at the money, and you got to look at these monetary theories. And if you want to know about the future of where the economy is going, you have to look at probability theories. So you have to use statistical probability theory, like the rolling of the dice logic, to think, well, where might things maybe go based on a trend of the past, few weeks or months, maybe. But then that works for, like, let's say a short-term weather forecast. You can kind of say, okay, based on the cold front meeting a hot front and the sort of the motion of the clouds, 2 hours ago in this region of the earth, you could say likely, probably where things will be in 5 hours or a day or 2 days. But the accuracy obviously drops off hyperbolically the more days out from the present you get. So that doesn't work for any type of qualitative long-range forecast, and frankly, it doesn't even work for a lot of short-range forecasts either, because there's no concern for, well, what's the animating principle of weather per se? Where we don't look at, well, what is the magnetic field of the Earth? How is it moderating the inflow of cosmic radiation, which is saturating the whole environment around the solar system? And how does the sun and its fluctuating cycles of increasing and decreasing solar activity associated with the magnetic field, which itself in the sun is flipping every 11 years. There's constant pole shifts of the sun, which is obviously affecting the protective field around which the sun emits that goes beyond Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, and beyond, all the way to the edges of the solar system. And all of this moderates what the cosmic ray flux is going to be, but also how the cosmic rays seed clouds, because clouds are seeded. There's many types of clouds, but the ones that are the most dominant in moderating the amount of heat, like solar heat that comes in, is a type of cloud that is seeded by cosmic rays. And Heinrich Svensmark, a Danish scientist, proved this like 20 years ago, and he found a direct correlation. If people want to know what causes climate change, they have to think about these basic variables, because if obviously you have more clouds being seeded by cosmic rays that then induce a sort of charge and a nucleation around which the mist, the water molecules in the atmospheric rivers that are constantly cycling, like half the Earth's water, fresh water, is in atmospheric rivers. in a vapor format, that will congeal in certain areas and then will rain down in the form of certain types of clouds. Now, if we ignore all of what I just said and we just listen to, Greta or the IPCC priesthood of mathematicians who just say, "Oh no, we only have to look at these computer models that we've been using." The economists, same thing. They've been using specific computer models based on very similar type of techniques. The military strategists who have been carrying out wars from the Korean War to Vietnam to Laos to Cambodia to Afghanistan and to the present are using the same types of computer modeling, where it's devoid of any qualitative considerations of, well, what's the energy. If you're an economist, you're told you're not allowed to think, or you're made mentally handicapped to the point that you don't know how to think about, well, what is the quality of the energy that we're bringing online, or the quality of the food production systems that we're making better or worse by our decisions now to make money without any future or deep past considerations of what we're acting upon. So the same thing is handicapped for the climate scientists who are told, no, the mathematical models say, it is this one variable that we've been told to emphasize of some effect of industrial civilization called carbon dioxide, which happens when you burn things. And we've been told that one variable we have to associate always as a causal driver of climate, of temperature, despite the fact that there's no actual evidence that one drives the other. And in fact, when you actually look at the deep climatological evidence, as there's a good documentary called The Great Global Warming Swindle.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Damn good one. And like, Jeremy Corbyn's brother, Piers Corbyn, is a climate scientist who plays a pretty prominent role in that video, in that documentary. But they go across. They look, at the end of the day, CO2 is something which is, it follows after temperatures have changed in the historic records. It's not like you have CO2 increasing or decreasing that then causes an associated effect of increased or decreased temperature. It's always the temperature will increase or decrease, and then as an effect, we'll find the CO2 measurements also moving in some form of correlation, but as an effect of, not a cause of, temperature, which is all being ignored because everyone is told, like the weather forecasters that you watch on TV, to just focus on a small sliver of time, last few decades since like the 1970s. So all of the models, they ignore the cooling between 1945 to 1977, which was like one of the peaks of industrial output after World War II. They're told, ignore that. That's not convenient for us to consider those data sets, but we'll look primarily at the data sets of the last 35, 40 years, since there has been a bit of a trend in warming. But this little out of context sliver. Oh, are you still there, or did I lose my connection?
No, I'm still here. I just made
I'm always paranoid. I've lost my connection in every interview I've given. So I'm like,
I know your internet's
totally
on. No, I made you the preeminent.
Thank you. So you have people like Blinken who can come out and think that he's being supported by the scientific community when he says, without blushing, the idea that climate change is as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than nuclear war, while at the same time he's advancing a policy of nuclear war with both Russia and China at the same time. It's quite astounding. But again, they're mentally handicapped. We've handicapped ourselves by this emphasis on looking at the universe and the world and ourselves and everything, even biology, even like, how do you judge if there's a pandemic? Everyone to be a respected expert or a scientist or a politician listening to experts has to put their brain through the same washing machine of a mathematical filtration process. Because at the end of the day, you can just always pick and choose what mathematics what data you want to look at or include in your statistical models that benefit the outcome you want to get. So Biden can come out and say, oh yeah, the economy is doing better than it ever has in history, which is what he is currently saying. The Biden White House, I said Obama, but the Biden White House, it's probably the same thing, is actually saying that this is the best economic boom in history right now for the United States people, because look at how many jobs they've created. that's, like, you're not considering the people who are not in the job market. If they've like given up on a job, or if they're underemployed, those are people who, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, they would have been brought into the data that would have been forcing more mature economists to conclude our economy is tanking fast. We're in a bad place 40, 50 years ago. But now with the new methods of
it's the new speak of economics, Matthew.
Totally, yeah.
Government expenditure is economic growth. Yeah, that's why we're like that's why the West loves to talk about GDP numbers, which are so fictitious. It means nothing. GDP is like the worst way of measuring an economic output of a country. It's incredible, absolutely incredible.
Yeah, there was a lady on NPR radio. I listen to this garbage sometimes when I'm in traffic, just to laugh. But this woman was a Harvard economist. She was brought out as an expert to describe why the hotel business in America is booming so much, because people have so much disposable income, and hotel owners are having a great day. It's springtime for hotel seasons.
Yeah, it's so full of migrants.
Well, see, that's the thing, right? So if you were just listening, if you were just some liberal idiot like listening to these experts speaking in their fluff pieces on the radio, you'd be like, yeah, I guess Americans really have disposable income. And then she was saying, yeah, the hotel owners, the demand is so high, so they just keep on raising the prices of their rooms, and the demand is always met. The hotels are always full, so they keep on rising the prices of the rooms, and so that is a sign that the economy is wonderful. And of course, yeah, in my mind, and anybody who knows a little sliver of reality would be thinking, well, no, you got a total open border policy. You're filling these hotels across all of the United States, 5-star hotels in some cases, with immigrants who are being given. I mean, there's a huge policy right now and I'm generally for immigration, legal immigration. I'm not against that. But at the same time, there's a policy to weaponize this whole plan with a lot of George Soros money behind it. That's part of a long-standing project to undermine the viability of nation states per se, from different techniques. You've got the war on infrastructure, you've got the war on the children, the war on truth in general, on the idea of like what a natural, healthy family construct should be, the nuclear family itself. There's a big war on that. There's a war on, obviously, religion. We've seen that too. We've seen like pagan rituals being performed inside of the Vatican. We've seen like so many of the churches of all denominations falling apart under the whole climate fraud thing, but also the issue of, and I know this is being streamed to YouTube, so I have to use my words carefully, but other pandemic issues involving shutting down the economy for other reasons. But the family unit, the family structure, the religious institutions, the nation state, these are the three things that have been targeted for destruction for centuries. These are institutions which are nightmarish institutions for the oligarchy and grand strategists of every generation, who are obsessing always, how do they undermine these things? Because what connects the individual citizen with something broader than their personal selfish self-interest and an identity associated with their animal lusts and personal bigotry or passions or prejudices, right? The thing that allows us to mature, the three primary things are God, our relationship to God through whatever type of cultural matrix that we were born into, but there's certain universal values that we can access in a very efficient way. Our family units that convey traditions, convey lessons that are apart from the social engineers that would like to manipulate us. That is another a very important institution shaping the formative years of children. And then obviously the idea that you have a nation that has a history, a freedom struggle that you should take pride in, discover, want to pick up and defend at times of crisis. These are the three things that people like the Tavistokian, what's the name, the psychiatrist G. Brock Kisholm, who's also sometimes known as the founder of the World Health Organization, is a Tavistokian psychiatrist, a social psychiatrist, who gave speeches on the need to cleanse humanity back in 1946 of the delusion of God, family, and of nation. And people can like read my articles. I cite this in my books, his speeches before, during, and after he founded the World Health Organization itself in 1946. Because in his mind, in the wiring that they have as well, and whether people like Kissholm believes what he's saying or not, I don't fully know. But this is the narrative that is given, is that, well, we had wars throughout history. The wars wouldn't have happened if you didn't have nation states, because nation states, and this is the way mathematical thinking will always screw you up. You take something that's a complex, nuanced process with again context, with values, and you oversimplify and reduce it with some symbolic label and call it, in this case, nation state, as if all nation states are created equal, right? Is it? No, but you do that and you say, well, nation states, you then impose, as you would into a computer program, a definition. You say nation states are this. Nation states are the selfish expression of the individual desires of those who make up the nation state. And thus, because that's its identity, all a nation state can do, if left on its own, is to loot nature, steal from their neighbors in some, presumed Hobbesian selfish struggle, which will obviously result in antagonisms with neighbors, which result in obviously disputes over territories or resources, which result in war. And thus, if we get rid of the nation state, we would have no war. Hence, the League of Nations, have a one world government, was the G. Brock Kissholm, his name is hard to say, solution concept. Or similarly, they do the same thing to religion. They say, well, look, so many other wars were fought with religious influence, or with religion at the heart of it. So one nation has, or one people have a view of God that they label one thing, and their neighbors had another. So they had a religious war. You had Christians or killing each other, Protestants killing Catholics for centuries in Europe. And, and then you have Muslims and Jews having fights, and you got Christians and Muslims and Christians and Jews. And so again, the same kind of logic. It's that stupid, but they want people to see, to look, nod their heads in accord with bigoted, atheistic, nihilist intellectuals who then use maybe a flowery academic bit of language, but that basically have in their core assumptions what I just said, in that if you just get rid of religion, you'll have world peace. Everybody's going to have a big kumbaya hug, and we'll all be good, and we'll be in peace if we just get rid of religions, or at least take the teeth out of religions. The thing that causes people to feel like their religious convictions give them a sense of principle or truth that they can hold on to. If you could just get rid of that from religion, so that they can still get the feelings of being spiritual, they can have the feelings of religion, but they can't have any of the moral judgment that is associated also with a religious identity. That has to be taken down, so you can find what's weakest and lamest and of every religion that's out there, and extract, pervert, and undermine the value development systems within those religious orders, and then get everybody to create some sort of a very lame, I would say even evil form of ecumenicism, based on the idea that, look, we're all just feeling transcendental at the end of the day, whether we call, whether we're Jewish or Muslim or Christian or Hindu or Sikh or Buddhist or whatever, we all just yearn for the transcendental. That's just a feeling we all want. So we're all like in it for the same thing. So why are we fighting? And you get these weird rituals like they have in the Vatican increasingly, like they have with the last COP27 summit, where you had the new 10 commandments that were just created out of thin air to basically, and overseen by representatives from like 8 different religious institutions, who were all saying, no, we all have to get together to save nature from human activity, because nature is sacred, humans are destructive, and God gave us some commandment to protect nature, with their own political. And I mean, I don't know exactly how many of these people were aware of the political agendas that they themselves were advancing. I don't know if they got money for doing what they did, or if they were just ideologically wired to do this, thinking it's a good thing, or if they know it's evil. But the point is, that's the acceptable type of religion, or a religion that maybe has a UFO twinge to it, or a drug culture infusion with a UFO aspect to the idea that, well, let's recast our idea of Muhammad, of Islam, of Christianity, of Christ, and those stories around maybe something which is more compatible with what Hollywood has been preparing us for. CIA-funded Hollywood movies have been out there for 50 years and even longer during the Cold War, promoting stories that would accustom our zeitgeist to accept certain political scenarios, both apocalyptic in some cases, but also, the whole idea of either aliens from other star systems saving us or going to war with us, like in Independence Day, or from other dimensions, right? That also we can tap into by being on drugs, by just getting into a psychedelic state. And we're told, oh, but that's maybe what Jesus was. Jesus was an initiate of the Eleusinian mysteries, which is a big thing that Joe Rogan and Hancock and Graham Hancock and others are promoting. The idea that Jesus was an initiate of the mystery schools of the cult of Delphi, and these inner initiates that were being helped along with certain narcotics and drugs to have a better spiritual communion with forces that we thought of as demons, but they're actually just beings from other dimensions. That now quantum mechanics, the mathematical probability field of quantum mechanics, which again, Max Planck, Einstein, Mendeleev, Madame Curie, these were real scientists who were discovering the quantum domain of the nucleus. What's actually going on inside of the atom, or what is the atom, right? What is this micro domain that is too small for the senses to pick up? And they were making discoveries, amazing discoveries of the quantum universe, by recognizing that there's a conjunction between the power of the creative mind that they all had as people who were integrated people to varying degrees, but integrated in the sense that they didn't see a difference between the subjective inner universe and the external universe, as well as the feeling state that they have as artists, because many of these, actually all of these great scientists were artists, as well as the logical side as scientists were integrated, that they work dynamically together. And as such, they were able to generate, both identify paradoxes in the logical systems that were given to them by the mathematical field that they specialized in, because all of these people had to know math in varying degrees. They had to be very good at math, but it wasn't the math that gave them the solutions to their discoveries. Whether Mendeleev's organizing principle for the periodic table, or what Max Planck was doing for the quantum of action, or Madame Curie and discovering several different elements on the periodic table of Mendeleev. They were using math, but only pressing it onto reality and seeing, well, where are the cracks? What according to the system I use and that humanity uses based on the most advanced knowledge that we have, where does the system break down when I try to use it on investigating empirical reality? And they would then be able to zero in mentally on these paradoxes. A paradox is not something the eyes can pick up. I can't see a paradox with my physical eyeballs. I can't hear a paradox, but as an example, a paradox is something that you could see with your mind's eye. You could see it if you have a cultivated imagination that is animated by reason, where the reason is not rigid. It is not logical or mathematical. It is able to be flexible enough to move and to self-reflect, to self-examine and change itself by its own discoveries of where it's lacking. So like an example that people might be, well, what's an example I could be thinking about? Well, a paradox that is seen through the mind's eye, one great example would be something that Mendeleev used as an example quite often to get his point across, which is phlogiston. What is phlogiston? You ever hear of phlogiston?
The heck is phlogiston? Sounds like some sort of place you go for punishment where you get flogged.
Yeah, kind of right. It's like a whole nation devoted just to torture, where you get flogged.
Well, I mean, we're exceptional Stan, so it might be an inverse of exceptional Stan, phlogiston.
Well, I guess exceptional Stan is becoming phlogiston quickly, faster and faster by the day.
Very quickly.
So this was something that every great scientist had to believe in for centuries, up until the day of Lavoisier, who was an associate of Benjamin Franklin and a revolutionary. He was actually a revolutionary in science, but also in the real world. That's why he got decapitated during the Jacobin bloodbath of the French Revolution. But he was a chemist. That was his specialty. And he is the guy who discovered the nature of oxygen and how and how oxygen works and can move from one compound into another. Now, phlogiston is something people presumed for centuries left iron or any type of metal that would rust. And if you take a metal bar or an iron bar and you put it in water, for over time it'll rust, it'll change color. And what people were noticing is that they were like, well, it seems like this rusted hunk of metal is larger than the original size of the metal that was put into the water years ago. So because it's larger, it must be that not larger, opposite. They said, oh, it's full of holes, right? So the rusted metal looks like it's full of holes. It's obviously, it looks like it's falling apart. And they were like, well, whatever, it's less than the original because it's full of holes and stuff, and it's falling apart. So whatever was originally in the pure metal must have left, resulting in these holes and this discoloration. They presume that they attributed an identity, of value, to this imaginary substance called phlogiston. And they were like, phlogiston is that which was in the metal that leaves when it's in water. And then Lavoisier was like, but there's a paradox. And here's the paradox that you can't see with the eyes, but you can see with the mind's eye. The paradox is when you weigh the before and after bar of metal, before and after rust, the rusted metal after it's been soaking in water is heavier. How the fuck is something leaving it if it is now heavier? And through a series of just crucial, simple experiments, very elegant, little 7-year-old kids can reproduce this. If you had a loving, school system that cared about their minds, they could go and discover this themselves. That there was actually, this could be accounted for by some property, which was now later discovered to be oxygen, that was infusing itself and binding into the metal and causing it to oxidize. Today we call it oxidization. And that's something that allowed for a huge revolution in chemistry and chemical science. And Mendeleev took it even further still. And to the point that Mendeleev was able to even forecast. This is the right way to forecast. See, that was earlier on today, I said the bad way of forecasting is like linear extrapolation of trends, short-term trends or whatever, right? Or trying to just impose some deeper, chondriative cycle, or Schumpeter did this a lot too with his broader cycles and cycles within cycles, but it's very rigid. It's very, very inflexible. But what Mendeleev did is he was like, okay, let's organize the known elements in a way which is as reasonable and simple as possible. But he was rigorous as all hell, and he was an artist too. And just like Lavoisier before him, he was a lover of the United States. And Mendeleev, keep in mind, was the chairman of the Commission on the Protective Tariff of Russia. He studied in Philadelphia at the Centennial Exhibition. He went back to Russia, bringing back with him his studies of how America was able to use a national banking protective tariff policy with a scientific outlook towards investing in new discoveries that would then be applied to the productive process in order to allow for the U.S. to heal from the self-destruction of the Civil War, and then to come to a point in a very short amount of time that they were able to take in more and more rates of immigration from Europe and the rest of the world, and put them to productive work in a very effective way, in a very natural way, through the, and today you could look at the old melting pot idea of America as a nation that you could come and, from different parts of the world. And that was the whole point of the Statue of Liberty and the strategic relationship at the time that France had, both in the American Independence War, but also with the outcome of Lincoln's victory. There were a lot of American patriots who were working with the Russians, with the Germans. Many of them were scientists, who were all on board with the same realization that we've all been manipulated by the same oligarchical agency centered in Venice and London that's been trying to get us to kill each other through getting us to just, have wars over territorial bigotry or religious names or whatever. And they all began to realize we have to stop falling for these traps that have been getting us to screw ourselves over for centuries. And you began to see the formation of a new type of system of win-win cooperation. Mendeleev was a guy who spearheaded this and drove this process in Russia. Now, he was able to, on the one hand, he was the head of the Committee for the Protective Tariff, and he was making fun of the liberalizers of Russia and of Europe who were promoting free trade, saying that Russia should just get rid of their protective tariff open up their gates for global free markets the same way the Chinese did. Look what happened to them. That worked out well for the Opium Wars. And Mendeleev actually called the free trading doctrinaires believers in phlogiston of economics, and he used that language. But today people read his speech on attacking free trade as just an economic variant of phlogiston, and they don't know what he's talking about because, again, our scientific training has been undermined. But his looking at the future, he was able to forecast something like 7 elements that he said would be discovered. So when you look at the configuration of and he wasn't looking at electrons. See, we're told today, well, how did Mendeleev discover his periodic table? Well, we're told, well, he just added electrons, and every time you add another electron to an atom, it changes its quality and becomes something else. It goes from hydrogen to helium, and you just add another electron, it becomes another atom. That's what we're told. But here's the thing: when Mendeleev discovered the law organizing the periodic table, we didn't know that electrons existed. That was going to be another 50 years before that people discovered that there was such a thing as electrons. So what was he doing? Well, he wasn't using this quantitative stupid idea of just adding quantitatively some idea of like what even today, like what the hell is an electron? But he was actually looking at, well, what are the qualities that repeat with certain combinations of, like, how do certain elements in their pure state, in a combine into compounds with what's beside them? Where do we find these types of minerals in nature? These were considerations. Why do we find certain things like coppers and irons together in actual nature? Because he was thinking about the Earth as part of a solar system being shaped by a generative process of creation within the sun, which is shit going on I don't fully understand. Nobody really understands exactly what's going on, but whatever we call fusion, there's something where new elements are being created and sent out through the sun, through especially the coronal mass ejections, the solar flares that are constantly being sent out, generating a wide spectrum of elements that then embed themselves in certain orbits and that accumulate and find themselves slowly building up on Earth in one way, and in Mars has their own spectrum and their own distribution. The moon has its own distribution of elements and a wide array of isotopes. But the difference with the moon and Earth is that, and this is what the Chinese space scientists and the Russian space scientists are putting a lot of effort into right now, because there's currently a plan with the Chinese and the Russians leading this program to have a joint development of the moon, an industrialization of the moon, starting with a permanent scientific base on the moon that should be set up by 2030 at least, by the Russians and the Chinese. And they've said to the United States, look, join us, work with us, don't militarize space, let's work together. But the challenge is that on the moon, the lunar regolith is of a different substrate of any type of soil that we have on the Earth. It's just made of different stuff. It's also more diffuse, so you don't get deposits the way you get an iron deposit or a gold deposit on the Earth. On the moon, because of the lack of a magnetic field there, and also the lack of life, there's no life. And a lot of the deposits that we currently have occur because there's eons of living material that accumulates bacterial life, as well as bigger organisms and leaves that have iron in, like there's iron in living bodies, right? But it's condensed, and it has a form that when animals or bacteria die in a certain region, it can accumulate and it becomes an iron deposit that we then dig up. Now, because of the absence of life on the moon, it's more diffused. It requires a different paradigm of mining if you're going to think about getting the helium-3, which is a very efficient fuel source to initiate a fusion reaction, much more so than the deuterium or tritium that we have on the Earth. We don't have helium-3 on the Earth, but we have a lot of it on the moon. On the moon, you could have one truckload that could supply human needs for a year, one truckload at current levels, So you can only imagine that the whole idea of what energy is, what mining is, all will be completely transformed if this next level of a healthy fourth industrial revolution. That there's been several industrial revolutions since the first one centuries ago, but if you can get an actual human-centric focus on the next industrial revolution, which is where we see the difference, the fight between the two paradigms of what this even means, then in that point, you can do things like having plasma torches, using the atom, using nuclear power, processing the lunar regolith in a way that allows you to find the magnetic signature of each of the elements. Each element has its own magnetic signature, right? Just like every plant species, every living organism has its own magnetic signature. Every cell has a different magnetic signature, and it can emit and receive electromagnetic information from other cells or other planets. Even every planet has its own magnetic field and its own signature that is unique to it, but that it is important for the maintenance of the entire system, the solar system, in which each planet or each because it's like, well, why does Jupiter have 64 planets instead of, a different number? Why does Saturn have whatever it is, 38? Why does the moon why does the Mars only have 2 moons, right? Why do we only have 1? Why don't we have 2? So there's considerations that could only be addressed if you have a sense of purpose, of design, of a role that each part is playing within a greater whole. And Mendeleev had that sense, which is how Dmitry Mendeleev back in 1869 was able to forecast that at this location, he said, there will be discovered at some point another element that we've never discovered before, and it will have these characteristics. It will bind with these things. It will have this atomic weight. And he did that for like, there's these holes in his original periodic table, and he's like, people thought he was crazy. They thought he was absolutely insane, because who would have the hubris to say that we will discover such a thing in the future, that there exists and will be discovered these things with these properties. But lo and behold, he was proven right. Every year that went by, you had Madame Curie discovered 2, polonium and radium, right? And you had more. And then eventually, and it was discovered that, no, he actually had a way of thinking that didn't project using linear extrapolations from past experience. He didn't use empirical experience because we never experienced these elements, never experienced them. But he knew that they must be there. Just like Kepler, who he was using a Keplerian method, was able to discover his laws of planetary motion through a musical consideration that was given to him through his studies of Plato, and specifically the Timaeus dialogue of Plato from 2,000 years earlier, where this Pythagorean hypothesis of a harmonic music organizing the principle of the behavior and the positions of the planets, that was put forth. And it took a long time for a Kepler to emerge who had the wits and the rigor and the self-discipline to actually prove that theory, that hypothesis was true. And he proved it. And he also proved that there would be the discovery of something in what should be an orbit between Mars and Saturn, which turned out to be an asteroid belt discovered centuries later. And people were like, Kepler, why would you say that there should be something there? And who are you? We've never seen that there's something there. There's obviously no apparent planet, but there's a big gap that shouldn't be there between Mars and Saturn. So Kepler was like, no, according to my musical understanding, my harmonic understanding that generated the 3 laws of planetary motion, especially the 3rd law, which is used in every single field of science to this very day, and it has given us a power over nature because of that knowledge that would not have been a power had we been ignorant to nature's secrets due to the work of Kepler. But he's like, no, because of that, I know that there must be something that will be discovered. And it took 200 more years, but then a Carl Friedrich Gauss was able to emerge, who's today sold to us as a mathematician, just like Kepler. But in reality, these people were like Mendeleev, like Max Planck. They were creative, integrated human beings, like Benjamin Franklin, who were both scientists, but with a strong moral understanding that their scientific discoveries had a direct connection to the political laws that we generate for ourselves, the constitutions that we have to fight for that are more in harmony with God's law, right? And that would shape a much more healthy, matured human identity, independent of what, particular matrix or cultural matrix that human grew up within. But in that world, religion is a very constructive, good thing. These were all people who would devout. There's not a single great creative scientist I ever found who was not a fraud, who was an atheist nihilist, who didn't believe in purpose, or who didn't believe in meaning, and who didn't believe in God. All of these scientists I've mentioned had a devout faith in that. And this is what the oligarchy's been trying to destroy, right? By their cultural warfare, getting us to destroy our idea of, or they create an overly simplistic idea of what a man is. Like, watch the Barbie movie, right? Ken and the male phenomenon is the most disgusting, repulsive thing that nobody would, a man who's soft-minded would walk out of that as more of a self-hating idiot than they were walking in. Women walking out of that movie would probably, if they're soft-minded, also have whatever, anger and resentment they feel towards having been a second-class citizen for much of the human experience. I mean, women have a lot to be angry about, undoubtedly. I'm not saying that that's not true, but the resentment, the anger, the desire to want to destroy the inferior male being will be that much more enhanced, as it is designed to be by whatever CIA outfit is funding that movie. So the idea of what it means to be a human is being destroyed. People are told, put the skin color ahead of your humanity, your gender, put that ahead of your humanity, how you feel at any given second, put that ahead of your universal character of humanity. And then we're told, well, that's what men and women are. That's what a nation is. A nation is just this selfish thing made up of our selfish impulses as selfish beings to cause wars. And if we got rid of nations, we'd be happy. And if we got rid of our old obsolete ideas of Judeo-Christian values and God, we would just be better, and we'd be in a happy place, and the world would just be, we'd be eating bugs in harmony with nature. The floods wouldn't happen. We wouldn't have the gods wouldn't punish us with our climate sins anymore, and we'd be in harmony, nuzzling up with polar bears, who'd be licking our faces, not eating us, because the polar bears are probably vegan.
Well, we'll be sharing a Coke with them, man. Like Coca-Cola, and everything would be fine. And it's kumbaya. And this is the siren song of the globalist West. This is their siren song. Devolve yourself, dehumanize yourself, destroy your self-identity, who you are, cast your brain out the window, rely upon vapid feelings, and all will be fine. And most importantly, trust us. That's the whole thing. Matt, we're at the end of the show. Any last things you want to say?
No, that's good.
Matt, thank you so much for joining us, folks. He is the man, the myth, the brain trust himself. You can find him over at CanadianPatriot.org, as well as the RisingTideFoundation.net. And with that being said, we are over and out.